Chris Lynch News with Airpark Canterbury. Trusted parking, backing trusted news.
Time for Politics Friday. Joining me this morning is Minister for the South Island, James Meager, and Wigram MP, Megan Woods. Good morning to you both. Thank you for your time.
Morning, Chris. Morning, James.
James, let me start with you for the Minister for the South Island. Is there enough funding? Is there enough in the budget for the South Island, James?
Yeah, I think it was a good budget. I think if you look at some of the big ticket items in and around Christchurch, we've got funding for the prison build there. That's going to be jobs in construction and the associated services down there. You've got the hospital rebuild up in Nelson. And actually, just this morning, you've seen a really great announcement around the supercars coming to Christchurch over the next few years. So that'll be, well, possibly in the new Wigram electorate. So I'm assuming we'll see Megan there with the petrol heads. Mates all going around the supercar. So that's really good. Yeah,
that is a really good announcement made by the government today. Megan, you're a petrol head. I can imagine you doing laps around Colombo Street in your younger years.
Oh, that's right. In my EV, Chris.
That's right. Yes, and your EV. Yes, that was a very positive announcement today. I mean, that's gone gangbusters on the old Facebook page. People are excited by that. Megan, what do you, in round terms, give us something positive. What do you like about the budget? Go on.
Look, I think one of the things, I'm going to go back to your question about Christchurch. So one of the things I really want James to explain about, because the boundaries of metropolitan Christchurch don't spread to Nelson, James. But one of the lines I did notice in the budget is the rest of the funding for the Christchurch schools rebuild project has been scrapped. So what does this mean in terms of schools, their ability to build? Because I know a lot of schools locally in my electorate that were still counting on having funding from that. So what are the on-the-ground implications of that funding being scrapped, James?
Well, there's several $100 million more in the budget for school rebuilds, and you'll see a few announcements around Canterbury in the next few weeks on that. And there's also, I think for the first time, we're actually properly funding learning support coordinators in schools. So every single school around the country now has access to a learning support coordinator. And
Sorry,
I can
James.
through the list of schools, but it's a phenomenal increase in the number of schools.
Sorry to interrupt. The specific item around the Canterbury schools rebuild has been scrapped. So this isn't just the normal 5 years maintenance projects. This is the money that was specifically there for Canterbury schools and the rebuild, and that is a specific savings that's in the summary of estimates. So just wanting to know, like, in terms of what that means in terms of those schools that need to rebuild. So it's not the general funding that goes across the whole country, it's a specific Christchurch project.
Well, the schools in Christchurch that need to be rebuilt will be rebuilt because there's hundreds of millions of dollars more in the budget for school property. And we've been able to do that because Erica Stamford's done a really great job about reducing the cost of building those buildings and actually saying, we're going to go modular, we're going to go standard fits across the country. We're actually going to build more classrooms for schools in and around Christchurch and around Ralston, Lincoln and around Central Otago, all the places in the South Island that need school growth. We're going to be doing that.
Labor says over $1 billion of Māori specific funding has been cut across two budgets, and that was in a press release, described as being shameful. James, what's your response to that?
Well, I mean, I'd always double check any figures that come out of Willie Jackson's office, but here's one of the big things. If you are really concerned about growing incomes and jobs for Māori around the country, and I'm not sure how you define that actually, but if you look at the 20,000 Māori-owned businesses in the country, every single one of them are going to benefit from the instant 20% depreciation write-off for those businesses when they invested plant and equipment. And there's a slightly, I think, sometimes racist undertone to this, to assume that, Māori are in this special little group to the side and they don't run businesses, they don't run farms, they aren't employers, they don't have KiwiSaver. They are going to benefit from this just like everyone else is. So I actually think that's a really great announcement, and it's one that the Labour Party supports. So I'm glad to have their support on that.
Megan, is that a fair point? I mean, Labour puts out a press release calling it shameful that $1 billion has been wiped from budgets in 2 years. But is that actually not really the case? When you think about it, the Māori economy is now worth $70 billion. It's been growing faster than the general economy, but why is that money not going back to Māori, presumably?
So I think that you can just go through, this is an easily quantifiable number. You can go through this year's budget and last year's budget, and you can add up and you can see those cuts. Last year was pretty bad. There was over 300 million of specific funding for Māori that was cut. This year it's over 750 million. And look, Chris, it's in some really, really important areas and something that's an...
Oh, we've lost Megan, James. Oh no, she's back.
Sorry?
No, you're back again. It's just frozen. There we go. You've come
glitching.
back. Yes.
It's glitching.
We're glitching.
We're glitching. It's the internet is outraged about these cuts in the budget, Chris. I think one of the things we've seen, cutting funding for trade trainees is just nuts. We've got Māori unemployment running at 10.5% at the moment. Trade training for decades has been an absolute winner and transformational in terms of how it is that we give people the best start in life, and to cut that money just is a really backward step and something that we were really proud to have put in place in government. And then we're not even starting on Māori housing. But
hang on a minute, you haven't answered my question. I mean, that's all good, and it's important to fund things when it needs to be funded, but you still haven't answered the question. According to the New Zealand Herald, the Māori economy is now worth $7 billion. Why is that money not going back to Māori, and why do we need to prop up more based on race if we're now looking at a $70 billion economy? It seems to suit the narrative when it suits the narrative, but not in this case.
Well, I think, Chris, you have a look at Māori unemployment running at 10.5%. That's not good for the individuals that are unemployed, and it's not good for New Zealand either. So this specific funding is actually good for all of us. It's about making sure that we're getting the best start in life for people, but it's actually making sure that we're making the most of everybody in New Zealand. And I'd much rather have those young people learning a trade, becoming builders, plasterers, painters, whatever, and making sure that we're all benefiting. So this isn't just about some knee-jerk reaction saying, why should we have specific funding for Māori? This actually is to the detriment of all of us.
Okay, move on. You go ahead.
The single best way to get more young people into work and into training is to ensure that those businesses have the money to be able to employ them and to be able to take them on as apprentices. And the only way we do that is by getting them to grow. And the only way we get them to grow is by incentivizing them to increase their productivity, to invest in their plant and equipment. And things like the 20% depreciation, instant write-off of those businesses will mean they have the money to employ those people and take them on. And the thing you don't do when you want to trade more or train more apprentices is you don't undertake $1 billion reform of the polytech sector and cause a massive upheaval. You actually invest in those young people and make sure you get them into work as soon as possible. And that's what we're doing. It's very simple. The other thing you don't do is let them sit on the benefit when they're 18 and 19, sit on the couch and do nothing, while their parents sit there and say, you need to go to work, but at the same time, the state will prop them up. So we're going to put some responsibility on young people and their parents to make sure we have as few young people not in education, employment and training as possible. We need to give them a proper future.
And having said that, when it comes to 18 and 19-year-olds, though, they are classed as adults, though. So why should they be propped up by mum and dad if they're still classed as adults and may have moved out of home and may be trying to rent?
Well, that's the thing. Those changes are targeted at people who are still dependent on their parents, but who are also getting assistance from taxpayers. So people who go out, my mum goes out and works at the supermarket till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, goes and gets her income, pays a PAYE, and then is paying people to sit on the couch and do nothing while the families don't help them. So we think the more responsibility should go back on those individuals, back on those families, to ensure that the young people are getting the chance at life that they need. There's no point having them sit there on the benefit, wasting their lives away. That's consigning them to a lifetime of being constrained by welfare dependency. It's just not an appropriate thing to be doing for young people. And as someone who grew up in a household with a mum who worked her butt off to try and make sure that she could provide to us, she wouldn't stand for this, and I don't stand for this either.
Megan, I'll get you to respond before we move on to health briefly.
So, look, I think it's all very well and good to say that, that people have got responsibilities. Yes, they have, but you can't kind of breathe this fire, James, at the same time you're cutting the funding to get people into training. And if you go and talk to small businesses that take on apprentices, they'll talk to you about that first year being the riskiest when they take on an apprentice, that an apprentice has got a lot to learn. They don't get a huge amount of value in that first year of having someone on. So actually partnering with businesses to make sure that you're spreading the risk because we all benefit, and making sure training is there. All this rhetoric is good and saying you don't want people sitting in couches. Well, then don't cut funding for the kinds of courses that gives them something to build a future with. Everybody wants the best for our young people, but you don't get that by taking away their opportunities and taking away their hope. So for me, this is empty rhetoric. It's not doing the kind of things that we need to do, and that's making sure we're setting our young people up for the very best futures that we can have for them, Chris.
Okay, I want to move on to health. The PSA argues the health system is still underfunded despite the budget allocation of $7 billion for services, $1 billion in capital upgrades. Are they wrong about this, or is there a gap in operational funding that's not being addressed, James? What's your take on that?
Well, I think places like health and education will always demand more investment. So when we've got limited resources, we will invest in health and education. We will prioritise those areas, and that's what we've done in this budget. I mean, along with continuing to fund our elective surgeries and our health waiting lists and our emergency rooms and after-hours care and urgent care, and we saw a lot of upgrades to our services around the country over the weekend with the 24-hour urgent care announcements. There is a significant amount of capital investment going in there as well. I mean, $2 billion down into Dunedin, upwards of $1 billion for hospital services with the rebuild in Nelson, and then some regional hospitals in Wellington and around Auckland. All of the work we're doing in GP services, the simple change of extending prescriptions from 3 months to 12 months will actually save people the time and cost and basic annoyance of having to go to the GP every 3 months to get a prescription that most of the GPs just sign off in 30 seconds and then click the ticket on the way through. We think those are significant changes that will be beneficial to people in terms of better healthcare.
Speaking of health here, just want to make sure your arm's doing okay there, Meagan. I know we've had some internet connection issues this morning, but you're doing a good job. You're doing different angles.
We'll make it work, Chris. We'll make it work.
Nellie, your PA will be very impressed. Meagan, funding has been promised for more GP visits, cancer treatments, aged care beds. Unions and health groups are still sounding the alarm. Is this just politics, given the fact, you can't, well, I suppose you could always complain, can't you? But $7 billion more for services and $1 billion in capital upgrades, not a bad start, is it?
Well, as James rightly identified, that health is one of those areas of spending where you have to spend more money every year just to stand still. And that's around both the capital spending and the operational spending that you have there. That costs rise, the new drugs that make a huge difference to people's lives, they're more expensive. A lot of the new technologies that we're getting in drugs. So I think one of the things that the health sector is pointing out, that this is actually standing still money. That what we're not seeing is the growth in areas. And before everyone says this is political, this is the kind of things health unions will say about labour budgets if they find that as a fault as well. So I don't think you can just say that it's the unions wanting to have a go at a national government.
That's true.
These are health professionals that have got a duty to have a look and to make sure there is enough money going into it. So one of the things that happens in the days after the budget is going through the details of things like the health budget to really understand where are we actually going backwards. And what we know that the $1 billion in capital really isn't enough to do a lot of the work that needs to be done for us not to just stand still, but to improve as a country, because I think that's what we all want to see.
James, do you want to quickly respond before we move on to energy and gas?
To be fair, there's not a lot to disagree with, really. I think Meagan makes a good point that the unions will go after what they need to do for their members time and time again, and fair enough. That's the whole reason of having a union, is to advocate for your members. But on top of that, we need to be smarter about our investments. But it is expensive to build things, so we also need to make sure we make it easier in this country to build things. So I would really hope that for big projects like hospital rebuilds and significant transport infrastructure, that there is significant support across party over a 30-year plan to actually build that infrastructure, make it easier, support things like fast track and RMA reform, so that it doesn't cost $2 billion to build a hospital. That all the savings we can make can go back into those elective surgeries and back into GP care.
Meager, the government is investing, or says it's going to look at investing, $200 million over 4 years to co-fund new gas field developments. I think under your government, you banned all that sort of stuff. So what's your reaction to that? I mean, officials describe the natural gas as part of critical infrastructure for the next, I think, 2 decades, and your government scrapped all that. What's your response?
Oh, Chris, this isn't an investment. This is a straight out gamble. There hasn't been a commercial gas find in New Zealand since oil and gas find in New Zealand since the early 2000s. After we ended new exploration permits, people who already held permits have invested over $1 billion looking for more gas in those fields. It simply isn't there. And what we're seeing, the rhetoric coming out of the government saying this is to shore up the energy security for New Zealand. Well, I've got news for everybody. Even if we were to find new gas today, it would take more than 10 years to bring it on stream. It's not there, but even if it was, it would take more than 10 years to bring on stream. This is the government just playing and jumping to the tune of what the multinational oil and gas companies have asked. It's a straight out subsidy that will go straight offshore. But Chris, it doesn't stop there, because one of the things that we found when we were debating the tax legislation last night, there is uncapped write-off for oil and gas companies there. So theoretically, a multinational gas company could come in here and say, we're going to spend $1 billion developing a field in New Zealand, and they'll get a $200 million rebate with no equity stake taken. This is just the government handing our money over to oil and gas companies for ideological reasons, rather than doing the hard work to ensure that New Zealanders can have affordable and secure energy into the future. It is an absolute dereliction of duty on this one, Chris.
James, the problem is we don't have secure electricity, and that's been proven last year with various power cuts around the country. Not too bad, to be fair, but what do you make of this then? Why are we even looking at giving away? Well, we're not really giving away. It's a possible investment, isn't it? $200 million.
I mean, the absolute chutzpah to say that this is a subsidy for oil and gas, and all that the past 6 years has proven is that we've subsidised Indonesian coal. We're paying through the absolute roof to bring in coal to keep Huntly going, because we no longer have any gas supplies to continue to provide electricity to people so they keep the lights and heaters on in the winter. You've got contracts with very large manufacturers and companies asking them to cease production so that we can rely on them to provide power to the winter so that people don't freeze to death in their homes. I mean, the absolute, I don't want to say the wrong word there, but chutzpah to come out here and say this is the wrong decision to make when we've put our sovereign energy supplies at risk with the signals we've sent to the market by saying we are close for business, don't even bother coming here. What this will do is this will give those companies who are willing to come here and invest the confidence that the sovereign nation of New Zealand will not flip-flop on these investments. And so I guess the question back to Meager would be, if there was gas to be found and there was a co-investment from government, would an incoming Labour Party come in and rip that out straight away, sell those shares or renationalise or rip that out straight away? That's, I guess, the question for them. What would they do in this instance? If the government's investing in these fields and they're making an economic return, would they scrap it straight away as well and keep the sovereign risk issue happening in this country?
So,
Meager?
James, if these are such commercially good deals, then industry will do it on their own. They don't need a handout from the New Zealand taxpayer. And what you're saying just does not stack up. In terms of saying we're subsidising coal at Huntly, that is wrong. The reason we are burning coal that we are purchasing on the open market at Huntly is because we do not have enough gas in New Zealand. That is not for lack of looking. That $1 billion since 2018 has been spent looking for more gas. It is not there. Get over it, come up with a new plan, do the work as a government, and stop looking to the past. This isn't, even if you don't care about whether or not we're meeting climate targets, well, I do, but if you don't care, then the fact of the matter, the gas is not there. You're banking on a future that doesn't exist, and you're putting New Zealanders' jobs and incomes at risk by clinging on to this rather than doing the hard work to think what the alternatives are. This is just ridiculous policy from the government. It's just yielding to everything the oil and gas sector has asked for. And quite frankly, I think the government's been made to look quite foolish by the way they've been willing to yield to all the asks from multinational companies. I
James,
don't make
all
any
right, James,
apologies
you're
for
nodding your
standing
head.
up for New Zealand.
James,
Well,
you're nodding your
it's
head.
not
Just final say on this before we move on to RNZ.
The reason they're not investing is because they see New Zealand as a tin pot country which flip-flops on its core energy policy every time there's a change of government. So what this will do is it will provide the assurances to those investors who are coming in here looking for oil and gas exploration that it's an extractive industry that the government is committed to as a transition away from coal. And the other part of it is the reason that there's not enough electricity in this country is because we made it so hard to build more hydro, solar and wind over the past 20 years that we just don't have the capacity for it. So we don't have the renewables that we need to. We're only seeing them coming on stream now. And if you look at all the fast track projects, in particular in and around Canterbury and the South Island, a significant number of them are renewable energy projects. So if you want to talk about making sure we've got secure electricity and energy supplies, we've got to get on and build those solar farms. And I'm more than happy for Meager to come up and open every single solar farm and wind farm over the next 10 years to demonstrate that that's what we need to do to reduce our reliance on coal.
RNZ will have its baseline. Quick, just
I do
10
have
seconds.
to get here.
Quick.
So, James, it just doesn't stack up what you're saying. More money was invested in looking for gas in New Zealand after we ended new exploration permits in 2018. It is not for lack of investment. It is not for lack of looking. It is not there. And actually, we started the fast tracking of new renewable projects. We agree on that, but you've also got to find some ways to store energy. And your government has dropped the ball on it. You're not doing the work. It's sitting on the minister's desk. It's waiting there to go. It's about time you guys crack on with it because you're putting people's jobs at risk.
No, you don't agree on the project because during the fast track, every single one of your members put up an amendment to delete projects from the fast track project. I will send a list through to Chris so that he can post it on his
James,
Facebook
more
page.
renewable
Every single
projects
Labour
were built.
Just a moment, Meager. I'll let James. Sorry, James, just continue. Sorry, James, just continue that because you cut out when both people speak. Just say that last line again.
Sorry, no, I mean, the Labour MPs during the fast track legislation put up amendments to delete specific projects from those lists, and it is on the record that those amendments were voted down. So I'm happy to send them through so that whenever those projects come to fruition, all the solar farms and all the wind farms and people are there cutting ribbons, we can make sure we know who to want them to go ahead in the first instance.
Okay, well, if you can send me that list, that'd be good. I do need to move on. RNZ will have its baseline funding cut by 7%, amounting to $18 million over 4 years. Is this cost-saving measure a decent thing or a political response to concerns about bias, Meager? Just quickly on this.
Oh, look, I think it is absolutely critical that we do have well-funded public media in New Zealand, whether that's radio or television. I think it is important. And I don't think that anyone benefits when we're cutting funding for that. This is a cost-saving measure because the government has to make its budget stack up, but I actually think they are doing a disservice to the people of New Zealand.
James, what's your response to that? I mean, critics have called RNZ a left-leading machine for Labour. Do you agree with that?
I wouldn't go that far, Chris. That's very unfair on the people at RNZ. But look, they perform a valuable service. They are, all the reporters and journalists, I think, do their best, but they are in the same operating environment as you are and as every other media outlet is. Everyone is looking at making sure they get value for money. Everyone has to look at how they manage their costs. It's an industry which is a hard place to operate in at the moment. So RNZ, just like every other organisation, every other media outlet, has to make sure they are looking at what their baseline costs are and that they're producing value for money. And then on top of that, where the government does want to support public interest journalism, it has continued to invest in and has increased the funding for local democracy reporting. I think that's a genuinely good area to invest in. If you look at those regional, they are sitting in council rooms, they are going to courtrooms, they are calling us up as local representatives, asking us what our position is on particular policies. They're not out there writing opinion pieces. They're not out there, flagging off ministers in Sunday columns. They are doing good, solid local democracy reporting, and we're happy to support that. Yeah,
I agree. The local democracy reporting is really good. I think that's a champion from RNZ, and same with NZME does the court reporting stuff. I think that's does the country a service. So at least there's more funding coming for that, Meager. That's a good sign, isn't it?
Oh, look, absolutely. The local democracy reporting and the court reporting is fantastic. And having well-funded public media in New Zealand is what we need in this country. that it is important. We've had it for nearly a century now, and it's something that I'd like to see continue. But the other thing, I'm getting texts from the whips. I have to get back down to the house. The debates are going on, Chris. And
Well, look, can I just say you've done an outstanding job holding your bloody cell phone because of the technical issues, and James has done a great job with the construction going on there. So, look, I really appreciate your time, and I'll be tuning into Parliament TV. It's got nothing better to do. Have a lovely weekend, you two, and thanks so much for your time.
You too. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Chris. See you soon.